So awkward. Why did I do that?
I don't know. Yeah, we'll just pull like a music. We'll pull music or something. Yeah, it's fine. Hi, I'm Ali.
And I'm Becki.
We are registered dietitians that use functional approaches to whole body health, and we believe in the power of food as medicine.
In today's video, we will be covering what is a whole food, as well as why even the natural non-caloric sweeteners are not a good choice.
Yes, so when we're talking about food as medicine, we've covered in past episodes about how it's this double-edged sword approach. You want to make sure you remove the foods that disrupt the microbiome, throw off your hormones, are devoid of nutrients, and also can be pro-inflammatory, as well as having an abundance of antioxidant-rich, anti-inflammatory, robust microbiome balancing foods, and foods that help with hormonal and detoxification support. So when we're looking at the ketogenic diet, an area where we get stuck a little bit is that many people get stuck in that myopic, one-directional, yes or no, is this food keto? Mm-hmm. And in Becki and my perspective, we believe in metabolic flexibility. That means that we're just adjusting the levers of carbs, protein, and fat to get your metabolism to produce ketones. And we prioritize whole foods first over processed products.
Absolutely. So let's go through our checklist, if you will, of what is a whole food. How do we know if something's a whole food?
Sure. The first thing you would think about is, can you imagine it growing? So when we look at the things that we have laid out here, we have a lot of produce items. We look at like the scallions and we can see their root structure. We can truly imagine them growing in the dirt. In fact, when you get them from your farmer's market, you often have to really wash those bulbs because a lot of the dirt and minerals will still be stuck to them. We see with our squash and our bell pepper here, the stem is still intact. We can truly imagine this growing right on the plant that it was growing on. And all along the lines here, we can even imagine growing, when we're talking about animal products, something that has bone-in, skin-on, like a bone-in, skin-on chicken breast versus a processed, boneless, skinless chicken breast. And so when we're choosing these whole foods, we're going to get more nutrient density. And if you take this a step further to something like a halo health food of like a granola bar, or if we're looking at something like a can of soda, these definitely you cannot imagine growing.
No, you don't know where that stuff came from, and you don't want to put that in your body at the end of the day.
Most definitely.
Next thing you want to ask yourself is whether all of its edible parts are intact. So we can see, as Ali said, the stems, those might not be an edible part. We would discard that when we're chopping up and prepping these peppers. But looking at something like an orange, I think most people would think to peel this and toss the peel. And actually, in quite a few recipes, we do utilize either the zest or even some of the pithy part on the inside, because that's actually where you're going to find more of the polyphenols or plant-based antioxidants like rutin and quercetin, which can be very supportive of whole body health.
Yes, in fact, we've seen in clinical research studies that rutin is very supportive in combating breast cancer and tumor activity in the body, and then some of those other bioflavonoids help with histamine intolerance. So in our supplement, BioC+, it's a whole food-based supplement which incorporates these bioflavonoids from citrus, and not only does it give you a boost of vitamin C, but it provides those additional supportive compounds.
Absolutely. And then if we were to look at an orange versus a glass of orange juice, there would be additional metabolic impact of that, like looking at the glycemic impact of slugging back 8 ounces plus of orange juice.
Most definitely.
That's going to hit your blood sugar really hard with like solid 2 slices of bread in there, right? 30 grams of carbs or so in 8 ounces of juice, versus that orange, you have to get in there and peel. You're getting some of the fiber, you're chewing it, you're slowing down when you're eating it. And then if you add a little bit of cashew on the side or have it with some almond butter, you're going to slow down the impact even more.
Yeah, so going for a lower glycemic index as well as nutrient density when more of its edible parts are intact. The third thing that you want to consider of what's been done to it since harvest. So continuing on our story of the orange, if you will, I've seen, unfortunately, those cute little mandarins that we like to throw in our kiddos' lunches. On the label, if you check, it's been treated with an antifungal. So whether they do after harvest and they spray them before putting them on the trucks or they spray in the trucks, that spray could disrupt the microbiome and also your neurological health. So you would want to choose an organic orange that has not been chemically treated since harvest, especially if you want those antioxidants from the pith and the rind.
Now, shortcuts are always okay, like something like these dates that have come pre-pitted, but those pits were not edible, so they've been discarded, and the way that they were removed is likely just through mechanical extraction, so using a machine, but not using any chemical solvents or constituents.
Right, and the extraction is literally just a pressure pushing out that pit, something that would not create harm in the human body.
Exactly.
So that brings us to the final consideration of, has there been chemical solvents or additives brought to this food to create that extracted ingredient? And this is where we really unpack something like erythritol or monk fruit or even allulose, these new kid on the block non-caloric sweeteners. Now, these are derived from things like fig or corn. And so you might say, well, isn't that like a whole food ingredient? But to take an ear of corn into a odorless white powder of erythritol would require like a gas mask and a Breaking Bad lab in your garage and household. They will have to be centrifuged. There's a bleaching process involved. There's going to be hydroxylation and all sorts of biochemical and chemical extraction processes that are going to create a much more processed product, far from a whole food.
Right, so that's why we would select something like these dates, maybe used in our keto avocado brownie, which are going to have supportive compounds in them like potassium and B vitamins, as well as fiber intact.
Yes. So let's unpack our top 5 reasons of why we hate non-caloric sweeteners.
On the first one there, that non-caloric sweeteners are just simply not a whole food. And I think the one exception potentially would be stevia in its green leaf. If that were ground into a powder, that could potentially work through our checklist, but nobody's using it like that. It's quite bitter. So typically we're seeing like the Reb A form of stevia, which is just the extracted steviol glycosides, which are actually 200 times sweeter than sugar.
And that brings up the second reason, which is that we don't get to reset our palate when we're eating these non-caloric sweeteners. So our goal of shifting you to a low glycemic diet and a fat burning state of ketosis is that we want you to break up with sugar for good. If you're continuing to eat these things that are hundreds of times sweeter than natural foods, then you're constantly telling yourself that sweet is good and something that you want to continue to crave. And when you don't have that non-caloric sweeter counterpart, like let's say you're in line at Starbucks or you're at a baby shower or a wedding, you're going to still be white knuckling or craving that cake or that brownie or that donut. When you actually break up with sweeteners and you shift your palate to more savory, then you're able to appreciate the natural sweetness of like Marcona almonds or macadamia nuts. And this makes it more of a sustainable lifestyle change, and you're not tricking your palate.
Totally. It is a total palate recalibration when you transition away from some of these foods. And then the third reason, and I think something that we hear the argument in the keto community all the time, is that, oh, these sweeteners don't really impact your insulin function, or you're not getting any glucose from them, so it shouldn't be a problem on metabolic health. But actually we see that non-caloric sweeteners can impact our GLP-1 receptors in the tongue and can drive more insulin resistance, can also drive our hunger hormone ghrelin, so that we're craving more and eating more and wreaking metabolic havoc.
Yes. And beyond metabolic, we can see microbiome stress with these non-caloric sweeteners. So many of them are what is called bacteriostatic, or sterilizing to the friendly gut bacteria, your probiotics, which have a myriad of benefits for the body. Mental health, we see metabolic health and blood sugar control, anti-inflammatory effects, cancer-fighting effects, and immune support, all from a benefit of a robust microbiome. So you wouldn't want to be eating something with food as medicine that's sterilizing these good guys. Then with these sugar alcohols, we see that these are really not metabolized by the body. In fact, they're excreted in the urine in the same structure in which they're consumed. So because we don't break them down, they can create a lot of osmotic flushing, loose stool, GI bloating, and distension. And in that flushing process, we can see a disrupted microbiome as well.
And then beyond that, some of those sugar alcohols actually, when they do drive the diarrhea, looser stool, we can see that we drive depletion of electrolytes and also nutrients that are manufactured in the colon, like B12 and biotin. And other studies have shown things like aspartame to actually deplete glutathione. So beyond not having much to bring to the table in terms of nutrient density, they can actually cause depletion of micronutrients.
So I hope this video has brought you some food for thought and maybe a new perspective of why you should also break up with non-caloric sweeteners.
Be sure to subscribe below and also check out the resources that we've provided you, some podcast episodes on real food keto, metabolic flexibility, and why I hate non-caloric sweeteners.
And if you want to get going with the anti-anxiety diet, check out the Anti-Anxiety Diet Cookbook, which has a beautiful table of my favorite whole food sweeteners that I use throughout the book, including things like blackstrap molasses, these dates, raw unfiltered honey, and tune in next week when we'll be showing you a recipe from that book, my low-carb chocolate chip cookies.
Yum. What is a whole food, as well as why even some of the natural I said some. Why can't I do that?
Just as well as why,
Why?
as well as why, as well as why, as well
As
as
well
why
as
the
why.
non, as well as why the non.